Today I want to talk about something that's pretty concerning, something that everybody should at least be aware of, something that relates to the citizens, police, and that thin blue line that divides them. A new bill in the state of Florida has been submitted, Senate Bill 1092. They refer to this as the Raynor Act. If you're not familiar, Jason Raynor was a police officer with the Daytona Beach Police Department. Raynor sadly lost his life in 2021 in an encounter with a citizen, Othel Wallace. I covered this incident when it first happened. I covered the facts as we knew them without feelings. Some people didn't like it because their feelings didn't align with facts. But wrong is wrong and right is right, regardless of how you feel. I covered it without bias, as we should. I want to preface this with the loss of life is always tragic. This incident was terrible all the way around. But this bill that they're trying to pass is shocking, disturbing, and concerning. And everyone needs to be aware of it. And we are all free to form our own opinions. To understand this bill, we have to first briefly recap the incident. On that night in 2021, Officer Raynor was driving his marked police vehicle on a normal patrol within Daytona Beach. He drove to the rear of a very small apartment complex that's located on a residential street. There, Raynor noticed what to him seemed like a suspicious vehicle backed into a parking spot. The vehicle seemed to be occupied by one person, unknown to Raynor, later identified as Wallace. Raynor decided to stop his vehicle, get out, and make contact with the occupant of the vehicle. It's important to note that no crime had been reported. Neither the vehicle nor its occupant were suspected of any crime or to be involved with anything. He just felt that the presence was suspicious. Now, in a case like this, by law, police can engage in a consensual encounter. They are completely free to ask you who you are, why you're there, what you're doing. But the citizen is completely free to decline to answer any questions, identify themselves, or they can just walk away if they want to. They can even use mean words if they want. It's their right. It's consensual. With no suspicion of a crime, the officer has no legal choice but to just accept whatever the citizen says or doesn't say. If they want to walk away, they can walk away. And in this case, Wallace wanted to do just that. He wanted no part of the conversation. Raynor asked him what he was doing. Do you live here? And Wallace wasn't interested. Now Wallace had stood up from his vehicle. The driver's door opened and he stood up from the vehicle. Raynor was standing in the doorway of that open door, blocking the exit path of Wallace. It was very clear he wanted nothing to do with the police. He didn't want to have the conversation. He wanted to leave. Wallace then tried to move past Raynor to go freely about his way. And this is where bad got worse, and then much, much worse. Raynor then put his hands on Wallace in an effort to physically detain him and keep him from walking away. Again, no crime had been committed or was suspected. It was at this point that the scuffle began. Wallace fighting to get away, and Raynor fighting to detain him and keep him there. Sadly, this went way too far, and Wallace used deadly force against Raynor, and then fled the area. What many people don't realize or understand is that they have the right to protect themselves from any attacker with or without a badge. The level of force used, however, to protect yourself has to be justified for the incident. But let's use a hypothetical scenario as an example. Imagine a person, just a regular citizen, approaches you at night. They start asking you questions, you're not interested, and they're armed, and you're scared and you try to get away, and then they grab you and try to fight you to the ground. You have the absolute right to defend yourself from that unknown person, that armed attacker. But here's where people get confused and they don't understand. If that attacker happens to be a law enforcement officer, you have just as much right to protect yourself. And rightfully so, as we all know, cops are just people. And a person is not a good person just because they're wearing a badge. We've seen too many examples of bad people wearing a badge. We've seen cops charged with horrific crimes. And again, I don't condone what happened here, and I'm not saying I support what happened here. It's a touchy subject, but I just go over facts without bias. Now in comes Senate Bill 1092. The Raynor Act. You should definitely read over this bill for yourself and definitely share it with others. But in summary, it would make it a crime for you to defend yourself against a law enforcement officer's actions, whether legal or illegal. And yes, you heard that correctly. The bill states that even if the cop's actions against you are illegal, you are being victimized by that person, by that cop. You must just take it, accept it, and then later deal with it with the complaint system or the court system, because we all know how fair and just those are, right? Now, Daytona Beach is in Volusia County, Florida. The sheriff of Volusia County Sheriff's Office is Mike Chitwood, who was once the police chief of the Daytona Beach Police Department. No matter where you live, you've probably heard or seen Mike Chitwood somewhere, as he takes any opportunity he can to make the news. But he, of course, chimed in and supports this bill. Here's a bit of what he has to say about this bill. Chitwood says, "You can say, 'Screw you, I'm not talking to you,' and walk away, and you're well within your rights to do that. But you can't turn around and say, 'I don't like your questions, and I don't like the fact that you touched me, so now I'm going to end your life.'" Now, that might sound great to him as a quote, but what did he say there? You can walk away, and you're within your rights to do that. Or you can say, "I don't want to talk to you." That's your right. But in this case, this very case that sparked this bill, the person did try to do that, but it didn't work. Chitwood says he thinks this bill is common sense and that people should know they can't take the law into their own hands. That's why we have the court system, he says. This bill applies to law enforcement and correction officers. Anybody who is known to be law enforcement or even appears to be law enforcement. Think of how dangerous and open that could be. The bill would make it illegal for a person to use or threaten to use force to resist, arrest, or detention, whether lawful or unlawful. This is a scary bill. How many police impersonators have we heard of? Jeremy DeWitt comes to mind. Imagine someone like that dressed up as a cop approaches you when you've done nothing wrong, and you know you've done nothing wrong, but he appears to be a cop. He's armed and forces you into his vehicle and drives away with you. With a bill like this, you would know that you can't legally defend yourself, and you'll just have to hope the complaint system or the court system helps you out if you survive the encounter. If you would like to contact Florida Senator Jonathan Martin to let him know what you think of this proposed bill that I have a terrifying feeling could pass, here is his email address so you can let him know exactly what you think, what your feelings are. Again, this incident was tragic. Any loss of life is always a tragedy regardless of how you feel or what your opinion might be, and this could have been handled differently. Wallace was charged with first-degree murder but recently found not guilty. He was instead found guilty of manslaughter. Wallace said in court that his only intent was to defend himself by any means necessary. Now, I know people have feelings about this, regardless of what side they're on. There's a lot of back the blue people that just don't care about facts, and they just want to back the blue no matter what. But facts are facts, and you have to look at it without bias, regardless of how you feel. And yes, Wallace did turn out to have a background with a lot of things in his history that a lot of people have a lot of opinions on. But again, I'm looking at the facts. I'm just looking at the case, regardless of who the citizen was, regardless of who the cop was. Just the facts and the circumstances. Another interesting note is it seems that just by the creation of this bill, that they would agree that that was not a legal detention. But these are opinions I'm not going to get into. The point is this bill, and my opinion, that the people's right to protect themselves, to lawfully protect themselves, should not be stripped based upon who their attacker may be. Again, you got to try to put feelings aside for this. I understand it's touchy, and I'm not sharing my personal opinions, just going over the facts. Do you think a person should have the right to protect themselves regardless of who their attacker may be? Or do you agree that if your attacker has a badge, or may have a badge, that you should just accept what's coming to you and hope for the best? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for being here. Twisted Luck. See you soon.